Cole had always been a man of routine. Living in a quiet suburb of Virginia, he had mastered the art of blending into the crowd. Most neighbors knew him only as the quiet single father who left the house before dawn and returned just as the sun dipped behind the trees. His daughter, Lily, was his world, a bright 9-year-old with a curiosity that constantly challenged him, and a smile that could make even his darkest memories fade for a moment. By day, worked construction, hauling lumber, mixing concrete, and managing crews with an unspoken authority that earned him respect without words. He rarely spoke about his past. In the small town, people noticed that he never discussed his former life, his previous jobs, or even where he had gone during long periods of absence. Some thought he was just private, others whispered, half in curiosity, half in suspicion. But no one pressed too hard, had an air that commanded boundaries without needing confrontation. At dawn, before the town had awakened, could be found running along the banks of the nearby river, his pace steady, measured, almost mechanical. He would pause, catch his breath, and then continue, sprinting uphill, leaping over obstacles, and performing exercises that were far beyond the typical morning routine. Occasionally, Lily would follow him, bleary-eyed, clutching a backpack filled with books and snacks, pretending to be asleep until she joined him in his drills. To her, it was just part of their morning game. But to anyone observing from afar, it was clear that was training with the precision of someone who had done it before, someone who had fought battles he never spoke of. Despite his secretive nature, had a sense of responsibility that extended beyond his home. One late evening, as the sky darkened and clouds swallowed the last rays of the sun, he noticed a commotion at the riverbank. A group of children had been playing too close to the water when a sudden undertow pulled one of them in. Without hesitation, sprang into action. In seconds, he had navigated the treacherous water currents, reaching the panicking child with a strength and efficiency that left bystanders breathless. He hoisted the child to safety, dragging him onto the bank while shivering witnesses looked on in awe. A passerby had filmed the event on a smartphone, capturing every movement, the calm, unwavering focus in his eyes, the efficiency of his actions, the ease with which he handled the life-and-death situation. The footage made its way online, and within hours, strangers around the world were commenting on the mysterious dad who saved a child like a soldier. Comments ranged from admiration to disbelief. Some were skeptical, others accusatory, claiming the rescue looked too professional for an ordinary civilian. Rumors began to grow like wildfire, suggesting that was hiding a secret, a past that no one knew, and a skill set that seemed almost impossible for a man living quietly in a suburban neighborhood. Inside the home, the rescue didn't change much for Lily. She admired her father, proud of what he had done, but also intrigued by the layers of mystery that surrounded him. "Why don't you tell me about it, Dad?" she asked one evening as he tended to scraped knees and prepared dinner, smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Some stories, Lily," he said, "are better left untold until the right time." Evenings were reserved for normalcy. Helped with homework, prepared meals, read bedtime stories, and occasionally laughed at Lily's endless questions. To the outside world, he was just a devoted father. But inside, he carried memories and experiences that he could not reveal, scars that went beyond the visible, and a skill set that had been forged under circumstances most could never imagine. His quiet demeanor, his discipline, and his unwavering focus were the remnants of a life that had demanded perfection and secrecy, a life that now existed only to protect the one person who mattered most. As the days passed, small town began noticing subtle things, the precision of his movements during physical tasks, the way he could handle emergencies with calm efficiency, and the way Lily seemed unusually well-trained in survival skills for her age. Some neighbors whispered among themselves, intrigued and uneasy. "Who is that man really?" they asked. "Why is he so skilled?" But never acknowledged the questions. He maintained a respectful distance, his calm, almost unnervingly composed presence enough to make even the most curious leave him alone. It was the combination of the viral video and his mysterious behavior that began to draw attention from beyond the town. People on social media debated who was, spreading theories ranging from heroic veteran to secret operative. Headlines appeared: "Mystery Dad Saves Child, Is He a Former Soldier?" And "Single Father or Secret Hero," however, remained unaffected. His life continued quietly, punctuated by early morning runs, work, and the daily care of Lily. Public attention was a distant hum. It was irrelevant compared to the responsibility he felt to keep his daughter safe, healthy, and grounded. Yet beneath the quiet exterior, tension began to build. Whilst routine was orderly and protective, it had also become fragile. A single misstep, a casual revelation, or a rumor could unravel the delicate balance he had maintained between secrecy and normalcy. He was aware of this, just as he had been trained to anticipate risks. Every movement, every decision, was measured to protect the life he had built. The world outside his front door was increasingly curious and unpredictable, and understood that curiosity, when combined with misinformation, could lead to danger. By the end of this first part of his story, Cole remained the quiet single that everyone thought they knew, but hints of the truth were already slipping through. The viral video of his rescue had planted a seed of suspicion, admiration, and intrigue that could not easily be ignored. For now, he maintained his routine, reassured his daughter, and kept his secrets close. But the calm of his suburban life was about to shatter, and the world, unknowingly, was about to demand answers he was not ready to give. The day after his heroic rescue went viral, the world he had carefully built for himself began to shift. The video, initially shared by a local news outlet, had exploded across social media platforms. Millions had viewed it, some praising his courage, others questioning his motives. The comments section became a "That's not a normal man," one comment read. "He's clearly trained in the military," another argued. But there were darker voices too, filled with suspicion and accusation. "He's lying about everything," one user wrote, "probably stealing valor for attention." It started small, a few curious messages on local forums, but quickly escalated. People were determined to figure out who Cole really was. Some dug into public records and discovered gaps in his history, years unaccounted for, no trace of military service, and no verifiable addresses outside the town. Others combed through photos, searching for hints of uniforms, medals, or anything that could indicate military affiliation. The more they looked, the more convinced they became that was hiding something, or worse, fabricating his entire identity. Word of the viral video reached veterans in the area. Among them was Carl, a retired Navy officer who had served in special operations. Carl was skeptical. When he saw featured on a local news segment, performing his heroic rescue with almost surgical precision, his brow furrowed. Something didn't add up. A civilian, no known military history, executing complex rescue maneuvers with calm efficiency. It was highly unusual. Carl decided he needed answers. That afternoon, Carl, confronted in a grocery store, was buying groceries for Lily: apples, bread, and a few cans of soup. Carl approached cautiously at first, then more forcefully, demanding, "You've got some explaining to do. Who trained you?" People nearby stared, sensing tension. Lily tugged on her father's hand, confused and frightened, responded calmly, almost too calmly. "I'm just a dad helping a kid in danger," he said, offering a polite smile. But Carl didn't let it go. He pressed harder, questioning his authenticity as a former soldier. The confrontation was brief but chaotic. Someone in the aisle filmed the encounter, and once again the footage spread online. This time it was different. It wasn't a heroic rescue, it was a confrontation, and appeared defensive, mysterious, and unreachable. Public opinion began to fracture. Some defended him, saying the veterans were being too harsh. Others jumped to conclusions, labeling a fraud. Headlines emerged. "Local dad confronted by veteran. Is he pretending to be a SEAL?" And hero or fraud, the mystery of Cole deepens. Returned home that evening exhausted, Lily clung to him, sensing the storm outside their door. She asked, "Why do they hate you, Dad?" Hugged her tightly, his heart heavy. "They don't know the full story, sweetheart," he said, And some stories can't be told yet. His words were careful, measured, not lies, but shields. He knew the truth could endanger them if it ever leaked. What the world didn't understand was that every skill he had, every instinct, every scar, had been forged in circumstances he couldn't speak of. Revealing them would be reckless, even deadly. Despite his attempts to maintain calm, the ripple effect of social media had drawn attention from authorities. A reporter from a regional news network called, pressing for an interview. Politely declined, sensing danger in every word he spoke on record. To him, federal investigators had begun quietly monitoring the online conversation. His rescue, once celebrated, was now scrutinized under a lens of suspicion. Anyone could accuse him of impersonating military personnel, and some already had. The small town, too, was divided. Neighbors whispered as they watched him walk past, carrying Lily's backpack, performing daily errands and training in the early mornings. Once friendly faces became cautious or even suspicious. Invitations to neighborhood events stopped coming. Remained composed, acknowledging no one's whispers, but he was keenly aware of every glance, every questioning stare. The town that once knew him as just a quiet dad now saw someone enigmatic, even threatening, because the unknown breeds fear. Meanwhile, on social media, conspiracy theories emerged. Some claimed he was a spy, others insisted he had faked his past to gain attention. The narrative of the heroic father shifted subtly, then rapidly, into the story of a man accused of stolen valor. A single online post from a veteran claiming he's faking it became a rallying point for thousands of commenters who had never seen him in person. Algorithms amplified the post, making a target for national scrutiny. Each passing hour added momentum to the storm. Amid the chaos, continued his daily routines. He trained with military precision, running, performing exercises, and instructing Lily in what he called fun drills. But these drills were far from ordinary. They built resilience, awareness, and control. He knew that if this storm escalated further, he might be forced to act decisively. The world had already begun to question him. If authorities investigated, he could not simply explain his past without exposing secrets that had been protected for years, secrets tied to classified operations and dangerous enemies. One evening, as he helped Lily with her homework, reflected on the situation. He realized that his silence was both his shield and his prison. By not speaking, he protected lives, his daughter's, his own, and those of countless others, but it also painted him as suspicious, even deceitful in the eyes of the public. Lily noticed the tension etched into his face and asked, "When will they stop?" Simply shook his head. "Some storms last longer than we like, Lily, but we survive them together." She nodded, trusting him implicitly, unaware of the magnitude of the battles he had already fought and the storms still to come. As the viral controversy reached local authorities, reports of possible stolen valor made their way up the chain. Federal agents specializing in military fraud began taking interest. Social media posts, eyewitness accounts, and news footage were compiled into a dossier. Quiet life, meticulously built to avoid attention, was now under scrutiny. The authorities saw a man who appeared to be lying about military service, a man with extraordinary skill and unexplained history. They prepared to investigate further, unaware that they were about to confront a man whose true story was far beyond ordinary comprehension. By the end of this chapter, the tension had reached a breaking point. Remained calm, disciplined, and protective, but the world outside was starting to close in. Every click online, every comment, every whispered suspicion edged him closer to exposure. He knew that eventually the authorities would arrive, demanding answers he could not give. For now, he focused on Lily, keeping her safe, keeping her life normal, and keeping the storm at bay. But in his heart, he understood. The world's curiosity would not be satisfied with heroics or silence alone. It wanted truth, and his truth was dangerous. And so, as night fell over the small Virginia town, sat quietly by the window, Lily asleep beside him, contemplating what would come next. He had survived battles before. hidden in shadows and protected lives that no one would ever know. But this battle, fought in the court of public opinion and under the scrutiny of federal authorities, was different. This one was personal. And for the first time in years, felt the weight of history pressing down on him, knowing that soon he would be forced to confront a world that misunderstood him completely. The next morning arrived with a chill that seemed to mirror the tension building outside Cole's front door. Dawn's pale light filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across the modest living room where Lily sat, eating breakfast with her usual cheerful innocence. Ever precise in his routine, was already dressed and ready for his morning run along the riverbank. But before he could step outside, a sudden, heavy knock reverberated through the house, an insistent pounding that carried authority, urgency, and threat. Froze, listening. He had encountered danger before, though never so openly in his quiet suburban neighborhood. His instincts, honed over years of disciplined training and experiences that no one could imagine, kicked in. He assessed the sounds, the timing, the rhythm. This was no neighbor or casual stranger. It was official. He turned to Lily, who had stopped mid-bite, her brown eyes wide with confusion. "Stay inside, Lily," he said softly, his voice calm but firm. "Lock the door and don't open it for anyone." She nodded, a shiver of fear running through her small body, moved to the door and peered through the peephole. Outside, a group of men in dark suits and tactical gear waited, their expressions unreadable but their intent unmistakable. Federal agents. The insignia on their badges and the weapons strapped to their sides left no doubt. He was about to be confronted by authorities. The door burst open without warning. "Cole, federal agents, hands where we can see them," one shouted. His body reacted with a combination of precision and restraint. He raised his hand slowly, never making a sudden move that could be misinterpreted as aggression. Lily cried out from behind him, clutching her stuffed bear to her chest. The agents didn't hesitate. Within seconds, they had cuffed and were ushering him toward a waiting vehicle. His calm composure contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding him. Neighbors gathered, some peering from behind curtains, others stepping cautiously outside. Murmurs ran through the small crowd. Who are these people? Why are they taking him? The viral controversy had escalated from online speculation to real-world action, and now the quiet father everyone thought they knew was being treated like a criminal. Eyes met Lily through the window, and he gave her a reassuring nod. "Trust me," the look said. Inside the waiting vehicle, remained silent, his mind running through possibilities. The agents had likely received reports labeling him as a fraud, someone impersonating military personnel. That wasn't entirely wrong. They didn't know he had served, but they assumed a lack of records meant deception. His real history was classified, hidden, and intentionally erased from public databases to protect him and those connected to past covert missions. He could explain nothing without endangering himself and others. The drive to the federal facility was tense and silent. Agents kept a close watch on him, glancing occasionally at their files, double-checking his identity. Each click of the handcuffs and each turn of the vehicle's tires seemed amplified in his mind. Outside, the world was watching. Cameras, drones, and smartphones, some belonging to reporters, others to curious neighbors, had begun to capture his every move. The man who once moved unnoticed through a quiet town was now in the spotlight, a subject of suspicion and scrutiny. At the detention center, was led into a stark room with bright fluorescent lights. The walls were bare, the air cool and clinical. Agents closed the door behind him and began their questioning, their voices formal and authoritative. "Cole, we are here to investigate claims that you have falsely represented yourself as a member of the United States Navy SEALs," one agent stated. The words hit with the weight of accusation. His lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't flinch, didn't protest, didn't panic. He had faced real danger before. This was merely an obstacle to navigate. Documents and questions were thrust at him. Dates, ranks, deployments, awards. Records that should have existed were missing or marked as classified. The agents, frustrated by the lack of verification, became more insistent. They did not yet understand that its absence from records was deliberate, a shield protecting national security. To them, his silence looked like guilt. To it was survival. Each question, each demand, was a test of patience, a reminder that his true story could never be revealed, not yet, not safely. Meanwhile, Lily sat in a waiting area, guarded by social workers. She clutched her bear, her small hands shaking, trying to understand why her father had been taken. Every time the door opened, her heart leapt, fearing the worst. His calm, reassuring demeanor had always been her anchor, but now, separated from him, the world felt cold, strange, and threatening. She whispered softly to herself, "Daddy, come back," not knowing that he was doing everything in his power to ensure she would. The agents debated among themselves. His precise answers, his composed behavior, and the subtle physical indications, scars, posture, reaction speed, didn't match the profile of a fraud. But without records, they had no proof of legitimacy. Suspicion hung in the room, thick and heavy. Outside the facility, news crews had gathered. The story had become national news. Single father arrested for allegedly impersonating Navy SEALs. Headlines were sensational, social media, exploding with comments ranging from outrage to sympathy, from ridicule to fear. Despite the tension, his mind remained sharp. He assessed the situation, calculating risks, predicting movements, and preparing for contingencies. He had trained for situations far more dangerous than this: combat zones, covert operations, life-and-death missions where a single misstep could cost lives. This was different but not insurmountable. Patience and composure would be his allies. Any mistake, however, could jeopardize not just him, but Lily, and possibly others whose identities were still classified. Hours passed, remained in the sterile interrogation room, maintaining his calm demeanor even as the agent's frustration grew. They discussed the possibility of pressing charges for impersonation, oblivious to the fact that impersonation was in reality authentic experience hidden under the veil of secrecy. His every response was measured, avoiding lies but revealing nothing classified. It was a delicate balance, and had mastered such balances before, though never in the glaring public eye with his daughter watching from afar. Finally, the agents decided to escalate. They placed in a holding cell temporarily, preparing to file official charges. The stark fluorescent lights reflected off the metal walls, casting shadows that seemed to mock him. His mind, however, was focused on Lily. He thought of her safe in the waiting room, waiting for him, trusting him, and unaware of the storm that had engulfed her world. That trust became his anchor, a reminder that no matter what happened next, he would protect her first, no matter the cost. By the end of the day, the quiet single father who had once moved unnoticed through a small town had become a subject of national controversy. The viral video, the confrontation, and now the arrest had painted a narrative that he could neither confirm nor deny. To the public, he appeared as a man accused of fraud. To it was a temporary challenge, one he would navigate with the same precision, discipline, and courage that had defined his life long before the town, the internet, or the authorities even knew his name. And as night fell outside the detention center, Cole sat in his cell, silent, disciplined, and calm. He knew the world had misjudged him and that the next days would bring further scrutiny. But he also knew this. Whatever came next, he would face it as he always had, strategically, resolutely, and with an unwavering focus on the one thing that mattered above all else: his daughter, Lily. The next morning at the Federal Investigation Center, the room buzzed with quiet urgency. Agents, veterans, and analysts huddled around computers, filing cabinets and scattered papers. Their mission: confirm whether Cole had ever served in the United States Navy, specifically in the SEALs. It was a simple task in theory, but in practice, it quickly became a labyrinth. The more they dug, the more confusing it became. His name existed in public records, but only partially. Employment history showed only civilian jobs, and military databases were silent. Some entries were blacked out, marked classified, with no explanation. The lack of records frustrated everyone. The lead agent, a meticulous woman named Special Agent, leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "We have nothing. No verification, no deployment logs, nothing, and he claims nothing," she muttered. Other agents shook their heads. They had reviewed the viral video, analyzed the confrontation footage, and read every article, every social media post. His calm precision, the scars visible on his forearms, and his ability to respond to stressful situations suggested military training far beyond what an ordinary civilian could possess. Yet, in the eyes of the law, there was nothing tangible. Meanwhile, Lily sat in a quiet, sterile waiting room, clutching her stuffed bear. Her small fingers twisted the fabric nervously as she watched social workers and agents shuffle around, unaware of how deeply she understood her father's predicament. Her eyes, usually bright with curiosity, now reflected fear and confusion. She whispered to herself, "Daddy, not lying, he wouldn't lie." But no one could reassure her in that moment. The room's cold, impersonal walls seemed to close in, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the distant echo of a life interrupted. Back in the interrogation room, Cole remained calm. His hands rested loosely on the table, wrists cuffed but still controlled. He answered questions concisely, never offering more than necessary, never revealing classified details. Every word, every pause was deliberate. He knew what the agents could see and, more importantly, what they could not. His silence, misinterpreted as evasiveness or guilt, was actually his greatest shield. Revealing the truth could endanger Lily, national security, and countless other lives connected to his past missions. Agents began to notice inconsistencies in what they expected versus what they observed. While they assumed he was fraudulent, scars and posture suggested real combat experience. His movements were precise, controlled, almost ritualistic, like a man trained to survive and protect, even when restrained. One agent, examining his forearms, noted faint surgical scars. "These aren't cosmetic," she whispered. "These are medical combat injuries, maybe surgeries from trauma." Another agent glanced at her and shook his head. "But no record, nothing to verify it. It's as if he vanished from history." The tension in the room escalated. Composure, rather than easing suspicion, amplified it. The more he remained calm, the more the agents assumed guilt. Their frustration grew with every unanswered question. Outside the room, news of the arrest had made national headlines. The story of the single father allegedly impersonating a SEAL now dominated online feeds and news cycles. Headlines ranged from sensational single dad arrested for stolen valor to sympathetic hero or victim of a misunderstanding. Each passing moment public scrutiny. Lily, meanwhile, had begun asking questions. The social worker, patient but firm, explained as best she could, "Your daddy is being asked questions about his past, sweetie. That's all. He's safe." But Lily's young mind tried to reconcile this with what she knew. Her father was brave, skilled, and protective. She remembered the river rescue, his morning drills, and the way he handled emergencies with calm precision. It didn't make sense that the world could accuse him of lying. She whispered softly to her bear, "They don't understand Daddy. They can't." Inside the interrogation room, felt a pang of helplessness for the first time in years. He had survived combat zones, enemy ambushes, and life-threatening situations, but nothing prepared him for this, being judged, questioned, and potentially imprisoned for a truth he could not reveal. The thought of Lily waiting outside, vulnerable and scared, pushed him to remain composed. He understood the importance of patience, of letting the process unfold while controlling the only thing he could, his own responses. Hours passed. Agents continued their investigation, contacting various military offices, attempting to verify any record of service. Each call, each fax, each database query ended in frustration. Records were classified, missing, or non-existent, had been placed under a new identity years ago after completing missions that had never been acknowledged publicly. His actions had saved countless lives, prevented global crises, and eliminated threats, but the world had no record of it. To the federal agents, it looked like deception. It was the burden of secrecy he had always carried. Meanwhile, the media frenzy intensified. Social media platforms exploded with opinions, conspiracy theories, and accusations. Commenters dissected his videos, scrutinized his gestures, and speculated endlessly about his past. "Why so skilled if he's not military?" one post asked. "There's something they're hiding," another claimed. Each speculation, though baseless, added pressure to the investigation. The small town where had lived quietly for years now felt exposed, as if the entire community were part of the unfolding drama. Despite the mounting tension, maintained his discipline. He anticipated the agents' questions, read their microexpressions, and measured each response carefully. Every word he spoke, every motion he made was calculated to avoid misinterpretation. He had faced enemies who wanted to kill him, betray him, or expose his identity before, but this challenge was different. Here, the threat was procedural, bureaucratic, and public scrutiny. And unlike his previous battles, there was no physical danger, but the stakes were just as high. Lily's safety, his freedom, and the integrity of the secrets he protected. By evening, the agents had reached a temporary dead end. Without documentation, they could not confirm or deny service. They had a man who possessed undeniable skill, exhibited unshakable composure, and bore scars consistent with military history, but no official record. Their frustration grew. They began discussing the next steps, detaining him longer, pressing charges, or escalating the investigation to higher authorities. Each option carried risks, but the window for resolution seemed narrow. Meanwhile, Lily sat quietly, exhausted from hours of waiting, her small body curled up on the bench. She thought about the mornings with her father, the drills, the rescue at the river, and the calm way he always reassured her. "Daddy wouldn't lie," she whispered. Outside, reporters recorded her every move, and online, speculators debated whether the frightened child mirrored her father's guilt or innocence. In her innocence, Lily represented everything was fighting to protect. She was the fragile anchor in a storm that threatened to engulf him completely. As night fell, remained in the sterile room, calm yet vigilant. He knew the world had misunderstood him, and the agents had no way to see the full truth. Yet he had survived worse. He had faced enemies armed with guns, explosives, and the determination to kill. This challenge, though bureaucratic and confusing, would be no different. It required patience, composure, and control. And most importantly, it required protecting the one person he loved more than life itself, Lily. By the end of the day, the quiet single father who had once moved invisibly through a small town had become a figure of national attention, scrutiny, and suspicion. The investigation had only begun, and the path ahead promised to be long, tense, and dangerous in ways most could not imagine. Cole, disciplined, resolute, and silent, prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that no matter what happened, his first priority would always be his daughter and the secrets he could never reveal. The following morning, the detention center was unusually quiet. Federal agents scrolled through the latest reports on Cole, still baffled by the absence of records and the growing public interest. The tension was palpable. Every passing hour added weight to the unfolding crisis. Then, without warning, the atmosphere shifted. The automatic doors to the facility opened, revealing a figure who seemed to command the room simply by entering it. Admiral Jonathan, a high-ranking Navy official with decades of experience in special operations, strode in with the precision and authority that only a seasoned officer could exude. His presence immediately silenced the room. His eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned every face, but then they landed on. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. The Admiral stopped, narrowing his gaze slightly, as if assessing something invisible to everyone else. Agents whispered among themselves, exchanging nervous glances. None had seen him arrive. No one had expected a Navy admiral to personally appear in a local detention center over a case of alleged stolen valor. Walked straight to, who remained seated at the table, calm and measured as always. There was a moment of recognition, subtle yet undeniable. His instincts, honed over years of disciplined training, immediately picked up on the Admiral's presence. Without thinking, he rose and executed a crisp, formal salute. It was precise, fluid, and instinctual, a gesture that spoke volumes without words. The salute was more than courtesy. It was acknowledgement of a shared history, a silent understanding between two men bound by experiences the world could never know. The agents froze. They had expected confrontation, denial, or perhaps arrogance. Instead, they witnessed a connection, almost imperceptible, between two men whose lives were intertwined by shadows of classified missions. Returned the salute, his expression a mixture of awe and recognition. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only could hear. "You didn't think they'd find you this way, did you?" he murmured, though his eyes conveyed far more than his words. His response was subtle. He allowed a small nod, the barest flicker of acknowledgement. He knew the Admiral understood the delicate balance he had maintained for years, the secrecy, the self-imposed exile, and the relentless focus on protecting those who could not protect themselves. Outside the room, the agents grew increasingly uneasy, sensing the shift in authority but unable to grasp its magnitude. His eyes then fell on his forearms, partially obscured by cuffs and rolled sleeves. A faint outline beneath the skin caught his attention, a faded tattoo half covered by a scar. The Admiral's gaze sharpened. He moved slightly closer, gesturing to extend his arm. With practiced calm, the tattoo was a symbol few would recognize. The insignia of Ghost Team 7, a covert SEAL unit whose operations had never been publicly acknowledged. Most believed it disbanded years ago under tragic circumstances. The details of its missions remained classified. The room seemed to constrict around them. Agents who had spent hours questioning had no idea what they were witnessing. The symbol on his arm, partially concealed by scars, immediately validated the truth they had been desperately trying to uncover. Was no imposter. The man they assumed had lied about military service was, in fact, a decorated operative who had survived missions that were unknown even to most within the military hierarchy. His voice, calm but carrying unmistakable authority, addressed the agents. "This man is not who you think he is. He has served, and his service is classified beyond anything you are authorized to access. Everything you see, the precision, the composure, the scars, is evidence of experience you cannot comprehend." The agents' jaws tightened, realizing the enormity of their mistake. Their hands hovered over files and badges, but now their significance seemed trivial. Still composed, listened quietly. He had faced threats that could have ended his life, been exposed to enemies who would have killed without hesitation, and endured losses beyond imagination. Yet here, in the fluorescent-lit room, he faced skepticism from people who lacked the context to understand the world he had inhabited. And now, finally, someone who did understand had arrived. His recognition was more than relief. It was acknowledgement, validation, and a bridge back to the life had forsaken to protect his daughter. The Admiral examined his forearms more closely. The scars told a story: surgical marks, injuries consistent with combat trauma, and subtle abrasions indicating survival under extreme conditions. He traced a finger along the tattoo, noting the precision of its design and the subtle signs of time and injury. Ghost Team 7 had lost most of its operatives during a classified mission years ago. Was the only survivor. He had returned not for accolades, but to live quietly, raising his daughter, while the world believed him to be just another man. Turned back to the agents, his tone firm. "Release him immediately. Notify all relevant authorities that this is a classified matter. This man is not a criminal. He has been protecting lives that you will never know exist. Any further actions without proper authorization will have serious consequences." The room went silent. Agents glanced at each other, the gravity of the situation sinking in. The federal charges they were prepared to file now seemed absurd, almost insulting. His eyes met again. There was a silent exchange, understanding, relief, and mutual respect. The Admiral had come not just to intervene, but to confirm the truth, to right a misjudgment that could have had devastating consequences. Outside the room, Lily waited, still unaware of the full magnitude of what had transpired. Inside, allowed himself a fleeting sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the storm was far from over. Recognition by the Admiral was only the beginning of what would come next. The agents moved cautiously to remove the handcuffs. Composure never wavered, but the tension in the room shifted dramatically. Where there had been accusation and suspicion, now there was awe, respect, and cautious acknowledgement of a man whose life had been dedicated to secrecy, discipline, and survival. Every movement he had made, every answer he had given, had been deliberate, measured to maintain silence until the right moment. And now, with the Admiral's recognition, the moment had finally arrived. As left the interrogation room, escorted by rather than agents, the weight of misunderstanding began to lift. He had been vindicated in part, but he knew the next steps would involve delicate negotiations, careful public statements, and ongoing secrecy. Outside, the media continued to speculate. Inside, his presence provided a shield, a signal to the world and the agents alike. Cole was not an imposter, and his story was far more complex than anyone could imagine. For the first time in days, allowed himself a small sense of relief. His daughter's safety remained his highest priority, but now a small piece of justice had been restored. The man who had been accused, scrutinized, and nearly condemned had been recognized for what he truly was, a survivor, a warrior, and a father. And the tattoo on his forearm, the silent emblem of sacrifice and resilience, had finally told the world, or at least the few who were authorized to understand, the truth about the life had lived in shadows. By the end of the day, the federal agents understood their mistake. The town would continue to wonder about the truth, and the media would speculate endlessly. But inside the facility, the bond between an Admiral had been reaffirmed. The man who had once moved invisibly through a small town, raising a daughter in quiet secrecy, was now acknowledged as someone extraordinary. The first step toward redemption had been taken, and the mysteries of Ghost Team 7 were on the brink of revelation. The air in the detention facility seemed to shift after Admiral's arrival. Federal agents who had spent days building a case against Cole now felt a creeping unease. They had believed they were confronting a man committing fraud, someone hiding behind heroism and social media attention. Instead, they were confronted with a quiet, unassuming man whose every action, every scar, and every measured movement spoke of a life far beyond ordinary comprehension. Had noticed the tattoo first, a faint but unmistakable mark etched onto his forearm. Partially hidden beneath scars, it was a symbol that few could recognize. The insignia of Ghost Team 7, one of the most classified SEAL units in modern U.S. military history. The unit had been involved in missions so covert that even high-ranking officials often didn't know the full details. Its members were trained to execute operations in the most dangerous and politically sensitive environments, leaving no trace behind. Most of the team had been presumed killed during a particularly deadly assignment years earlier. Was the only confirmed survivor. Admiral's voice was low, authoritative, and deliberate. "This tattoo," he said, pointing to his forearm, "represents more than service. It represents survival, sacrifice, and a commitment to missions that no one else will ever know about. He is not an imposter. He is a living testament to Ghost Team 7's legacy." The agents' faces reflected confusion, awe, and disbelief. They had assumed they were pursuing a fraud. Now, they were confronted with a reality that no database, file, or official record could fully verify. Spoke quietly, measured, and controlled. "I didn't volunteer for recognition," he said. "I served because it had to be done, and I protected lives because it mattered more than accolades or acknowledgement. Everything else is classified. If I spoke, lives would be at risk, including Lily's." His calmness contrasted sharply with the agents' growing unease. They had never interrogated someone like before, someone whose silence was not deceit but protection. The agents, still struggling to reconcile what they had witnessed, examined his forearms more closely. There were subtle scars, faint indentations from surgeries and healed abrasions, evidence of extreme physical trauma. Every mark told a story of combat, covert operations, and survival under conditions that would have broken ordinary men. The tattoo was not decorative. It was identification, a symbol of belonging to a unit that existed only in classified circles, a signal of trust and shared sacrifice. Admiral explained the significance to the room. Ghost Team 7 operated under a level of secrecy that is almost unheard of. Their missions are classified beyond standard clearance. Survival is extraordinary. His training, discipline, and skill are unmatched because of what he endured. He returned not for recognition but for family, to protect his daughter and to live quietly. That is why he is missing from records. That is why you found nothing. As the weight of words sank in, the agent's perception shifted. Every question they had asked, every accusation they had leveled, now seemed inadequate and misinformed. The man they had been prepared to charge with impersonation was, in fact, a hero operating beyond the knowledge of most even in the military. The very skills that had made him suspect in their eyes, his precision, composure, and physical ability, were evidence of the classified missions he had survived. His calm demeanor never faltered, but beneath it he felt a subtle sense of relief. After days of questioning, scrutiny, and the emotional strain of being accused, someone finally understood. Admiral's recognition validated a lifetime of disciplined silence and careful concealment. The Admiral had served alongside him, seen the evidence firsthand, and understood why secrecy had been essential. This recognition was not only professional, it was deeply personal. The agents began to piece together what they were witnessing. Social media had misled them. Viral videos and public perception had created the illusion of deception, but the man in front of them was anything but a fraud. His history, erased from public databases and hidden from civilian oversight, was genuine. It was a truth so extraordinary that even those with authority were only now beginning to comprehend it. Continued to explain, outlining the missions and dangers had endured without revealing classified details. He spoke in careful generalities, deployments to hostile territories, high-stakes operations requiring absolute precision, and situations in which failure could have cost not only his life but the lives of countless others. Every statement reinforced the fact that his presence in a small Virginia town, raising a child, was not ordinary. It was a deliberate, courageous choice to leave the battlefield behind while protecting the next generation. The agents listened, a mixture of admiration and remorse settling over them. They had assumed guilt where there was none. Their frustration with missing records and digital gaps had blinded them to reality. His life, hidden under layers of classification, had been invisible not because of deceit but because of necessity. They now faced the humbling truth. They had underestimated him, and in doing so, had threatened to punish someone undeserving. Outside the interrogation room, Lily waited, still unaware of the full significance of the events. She clutched her bare, eyes wide with worry, yet trusting implicitly that her father would emerge unscathed. Inside felt her presence in every thought. His training had always included protecting those he loved most, and now, the challenge was no longer a battlefield in a foreign land. It was ensuring that his daughter's world remained intact, even as his hidden past threatened to surface. Moved closer to, voice quiet, almost intimate. They don't understand yet, but they will. You've done your part, now it's my responsibility to ensure the world sees only what needs to be seen and nothing that compromises security or Lily. Nodded, a rare flicker of gratitude crossing his features. For years, he had relied solely on discipline, skill, and secrecy. Recognition from someone who truly understood was rare and profound. For the first time in days, a sense of resolution began to settle over the room. The agents removed the last of their formalities. The handcuffs were discarded, files put aside. Had been exonerated in part by the evidence they could now see, the tattoo, the scars, and Admiral's testimony. Social media buzz would continue, speculation would rage, but the immediate threat had shifted. The narrative of fraud and deception was replaced, at least within the room, with acknowledgement and awe. Allowed himself a moment of introspection. He thought of Ghost Team 7, of the comrades he had lost, and of the missions that would never be known. His life had been a series of calculated sacrifices, and secrecy had always been the price for survival. But now, With presence and recognition, he could step out of the shadows slightly, enough to protect Lily while still honoring the discipline that had defined his past. Finally, addressed the agents directly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. This man is not an imposter. He is one of the few who survived where most did not. Treat him with the respect and caution his service demands. And remember, there are things even you will never know about him. That is how the world remains safe. The weight of those words settled over the room. It was a moment of revelation and humility. His gaze fell briefly on Lily, whose small figure was just visible through the observation window. Relief mixed with resolve. The tattoo on his forearm, once a hidden emblem of survival and sacrifice, had now become a symbol of truth. It validated a lifetime of secrecy, a story too dangerous for the public, and a legacy he carried silently. The world outside could speculate endlessly, but in that room the truth was clear. Cole had lived a life most could not imagine, and his sacrifice, skill, and discipline were undeniable. By the end of the day, the room that had once been filled with suspicion now contained recognition, respect, and a sense of awe. The federal agents, humbled by the reality before them, began to understand that the quiet single father they had questioned was no ordinary man. Tattoo, his scars, and his composure were proof of a life of service, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to duty. And so, the man accused of fraud had finally been validated in the most profound way. Not by social media, not by public opinion, but by someone who had served beside him, seen the evidence, and understood the truth hidden beneath the surface. The next steps would be careful, deliberate, and measured, but for the first time in days, felt a cautious sense of justice returning to his life. By the next morning, word of Admiral's involvement had begun to leak, though carefully controlled. The detention center's staff were tight-lipped, federal agents cautious, and Cole still remained under protective supervision. The story that had once painted him as a fraud now started to shift, but only in whispers and hints. Social media exploded with speculation. The SEAL dad arrested. Maybe there's more to this story. A Navy admiral. What is he hiding? Every post, every tweet fueled curiosity and tension, but the full truth remained classified and inaccessible to the public. Inside the facility and met quietly, the admiral's presence was more than reassurance. It was a bridge between the past and present, a recognition of sacrifices unseen by the world. "You've kept your life hidden for too long," said, voice calm but tinged with gravity. "It's time to let some of this come to light, not for the sake of fame, but to clear your name and protect your daughter from continued scrutiny." Nodded subtly. He knew that the storm of public opinion had grown beyond control, and even the most disciplined silence could not protect Lily forever if the world believed her father was a fraud. His thoughts drifted to Lily, waiting anxiously outside the room in a secure, monitored space. Her safety had always been his priority, and even in moments like this, where recognition and validation were possible, her presence dominated his mind. The fear, confusion, and innocence of a child separated from her parent was a weight that no amount of training could fully prepare him for. Yet he trusted, and by extension, the careful orchestration of the revelation that would soon follow. Spoke of a controlled release, limited authorized media coverage that would clear his name while revealing just enough to satisfy public curiosity. The tattoo, the emblem of Ghost Team 7, would remain unexplained, a detail meant to protect the identities of others who had served alongside him and the classified nature of past missions. "They'll know you served, they'll see the evidence, but the rest that remains in the shadows," explained. Eyes softened. That compromise, though partial, allowed him to preserve secrecy while regaining legitimacy in the public eye. Agents in the facility were briefed to redirect all inquiries to a central point. Once under suspicion, now became the subject of validation. For hours, reporters and media personnel were carefully coordinated, guided to see only what was permissible. A father exonerated by the Navy, recognized by Admiral, and revealed to have demonstrated heroic skills in a viral rescue. No mention of classified operations would leak. No sensitive details would jeopardize national security. The operation was delicate, precise, and meticulous, echoing the same discipline had applied throughout his life. Finally, the moment arrived. Lily was brought into the observation room, still clutching her bear, her small face lighting up as she saw her father, smiled, his calm and composed demeanor softened by the joy of reunion. "Lily," he whispered, his voice low and comforting, "I'm here." She ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his neck, relief flooding her expression. The world's scrutiny faded in that moment, replaced by the intimate connection between father and daughter. The bond that had always motivated every action had taken. Outside, controlled cameras captured the reunion for public release. The footage, carefully edited and approved, showcased the truth. A man who had been accused of fraud, now recognized, reunited with his child. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Headlines shifted. Father exonerated. SEAL hero vindicated. Viral rescue hero cleared by Navy Admiral. Single dad's heroism confirmed. Social media sentiment flipped almost overnight, with users expressing relief, admiration, and awe. Despite the positive shift, remained cautious. Public attention, even favorable, carried risks. He had survived wars and missions where exposure meant death, and he knew that curiosity could easily turn dangerous. The release of his exoneration was carefully balanced. It validated his heroism without revealing the covert operations, the classified missions, or the allies still in hiding. Every gesture, every statement, had been calculated to preserve the integrity of his secrecy. Remained by his side, offering guidance and authority. "Remember," the Admiral said quietly, "this story will satisfy public curiosity, but it's not the full truth. You've done your duty and now you reclaim a piece of your life without jeopardizing everything you've protected. That's rare. That's valuable." Nodded, appreciating the wisdom. Recognition had arrived, but discipline, control, and secrecy remained essential. The world would see him as a hero, but only he and those who truly knew him understood the depth of the sacrifices behind it. As days passed, reintegrated into his small-town life, neighbors who had once whispered suspicion now nodded in respect, some approaching to apologize for doubts or skepticism. The media continued coverage, though it was carefully managed to avoid sensitive revelations. The viral video, which had once triggered accusations, now reinforced admiration. A single dad, calm and composed, acting decisively to save a child in danger. Public perception had shifted from suspicion to awe. Lily, once anxious and uncertain, now beamed with pride. She understood only partially what had happened, but sensed the calm and reassurance radiating from her father. Together, they resumed small routines, morning walks, school drop-offs, and quiet evenings at home. Yet even in these ordinary moments, the lessons of discipline, preparedness, and resilience persisted. Training and experience were invisible shields, ensuring that danger, whether public scrutiny or unseen threats, remained at bay. Federal agents, humbled and introspective, began to their understanding of classified operations and the individuals involved. They had misjudged, assuming deceit where there was only discipline and secrecy. Admiral's recognition, coupled with the tattoo evidence and combat injuries, forced them to confront the limits of bureaucratic assumptions. The lesson was profound. Appearances could deceive, and the quietest individuals often bore the heaviest burdens. By the end of the week, the controlled public narrative was firmly established. Cole was vindicated, a father, hero, and survivor, acknowledged by a high-ranking Navy official. The world believed him to be a SEAL, courageous and skilled, without understanding the full depth of his experiences. For this balance, public acknowledgement without disclosure of covert operations, was a victory. He could return to his life with Lily, maintain secrecy where necessary, and finally reclaim some semblance of normalcy. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, sat by the window, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past days. The viral video, the accusations, the arrest, and the eventual recognition had tested his patience, discipline, and resolve. But through it all, the guiding principle remained the same: protect the innocent, preserve secrecy, and survive with honor. Recognition by Admiral and the careful orchestration of the public narrative were victories, yes, but the true battle, the protection of classified secrets and his daughter, was ongoing. In the quiet darkness, flexed his forearm slightly, revealing the faint outline of the Ghost Team 7 tattoo beneath the scar, a silent reminder of past sacrifices and hidden truths. He had survived, vindicated publicly, but the depth of his story remained locked away, known only to a few. And that was exactly how it needed to remain, for the safety of those he loved and the security of countless others whose lives depended on his discretion. His life, once a quiet rhythm of discipline and vigilance, was now validated in the public eye. But he knew the real truth. Heroism was not measured by recognition, but by the quiet sacrifices made in the shadows. For him, every mission, every calculated move, and every hidden action had been in service of something far greater than himself. And now, with the public finally seeing only part of the truth, he could return to Lily and the fragile sense of normalcy they had both fought so hard to preserve. Weeks passed since the public revelation of Cole's exoneration. The viral video that had once fueled accusations now became a symbol of courage, quick thinking, and calm under pressure. Newspapers and news channels highlighted the single father's bravery, social media buzzed with admiration, and neighbors who had once whispered behind closed doors now greeted him with newfound respect. Yet beneath the surface of public acknowledgement, the deeper truths remained hidden. Ghost Team 7, the missions, and the sacrifices made, all remained classified, locked away in shadows that only a few could access. The quiet streets have slowly returned to their familiar rhythm. Children played in the yards, families strolled down sidewalks, and the morning sun bathed the town in a peaceful glow. But life had subtly shifted. The weight of suspicion had been lifted, replaced by recognition, yet vigilance remained. He had survived wars, ambushes, and covert operations, and he understood that danger often lingered where it was least expected. Every glance, every phone camera, and every new face in town was evaluated, just as he had been trained to do. Lily, once anxious and fearful, now moved through her world with a sense of pride and security. Her small hands no longer clutched her stuffed bear as tightly, and her laughter, once rare under the shadow of uncertainty, returned with unrestrained joy. She ran to school with renewed energy, waved to friends, and occasionally glanced over her shoulder to catch her father's watchful eyes, observed from a distance, allowing her independence while silently guarding her from every unseen threat. At home, routines resumed, but with subtle improvements. Had always been methodical, early mornings, disciplined exercises, and preparation for emergencies. Now he added new dimensions, security measures, careful monitoring of local and social media, and planning contingencies for unexpected situations. Lily noticed his quiet focus, but she did not complain. She understood in her own childlike way that her father's diligence kept them both safe. She often asked questions, which answered with careful honesty, explaining danger in terms she could understand without revealing secrets too dangerous for her young mind. Admiral remained in occasional contact, ensuring that exoneration remained secure and that no classified operations were at risk of exposure. Their discussions were discreet, coded in professional language and strategically timed. His guidance provided reassurance that could live publicly without compromising sensitive information. The Admiral respected his choices, to remain in the quiet town, raise his daughter, and live a life partially hidden, even in the face of fame. Despite the calm, occasionally reflected on the surreal path that had brought him here. From covert operations in hostile territories to raising a child alone in a peaceful suburban town, his life had been a study in contrasts. Heroism had once been measured by mission success, by the lives saved, by sacrifices unseen. Now it was measured by smaller victories, Lily's laughter, the safety of their home, and the slow rebuilding of public trust. He had moved from the battlefield to the of perception, learning that courage often took the form of patience, discretion, and quiet endurance. The public, meanwhile, remained intrigued by the story. The controlled media coverage had accomplished its goal, clearing his name without compromising security. While many speculated endlessly about Ghost Team 7, few had any true understanding. Some stories hinted at covert military operations, while others focused on the viral rescue and calm composure. Yet the narrative remained largely respectful, emphasizing heroism, bravery, and the importance of protecting children, universal themes that resonated deeply with the audience. In private moments, reflected on the balance he had maintained between secrecy and recognition. He understood that the tattoo on his forearm, the symbol of Ghost Team 7, was not just a mark of identity, but a reminder of the responsibility he carried. It was a connection to lost comrades, to missions that shaped him, and to the discipline that had defined every decision he had made. To reveal more would endanger lives, compromise missions, and betray the trust of those who had served alongside him. And yet, the partial recognition he had received, validated by Admiral, was enough to protect his daughter from further scrutiny and misunderstanding. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, sat with Lily on their porch. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. She leaned against him, her small hand resting in his, and asked, "Daddy, did you really save that little girl all by yourself?" Smiled, his gaze fixed on the fading light. "Yes, Lily, but remember, being brave isn't about doing it alone. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." She nodded thoughtfully, her young mind absorbing the lesson. The town, once divided by suspicion and curiosity, slowly accepted as one of its own. Neighbors greeted him with smiles, sometimes lingering for brief conversations, and community members expressed admiration for his composure and heroism, yet remained selective about exposure, attending only necessary public functions and continuing to shield Lily from unnecessary attention. Fame had never been his goal. Safety, security, and the well-being of his daughter were always paramount. Meanwhile, the federal agents who had once interrogated him quietly acknowledged the lesson they had learned. Misjudgment could have consequences far greater than anticipated, especially when dealing with individuals whose lives intersected with national security. His patience, composure, and professionalism had transformed what could have been a disaster into a learning moment, one that underscored humility, discretion, and respect for service beyond what records could prove. His connection with Admiral also deepened. They exchanged occasional messages, updates, and coded signals, ensuring that remained protected while maintaining the delicate balance between public life and covert responsibilities. His mentorship reinforced the importance of vigilance, reminding that the world was always watching, even when recognition came in measured doses. The Admiral's presence became a silent assurance. Whatever challenges lay ahead would not face them alone. In the months that followed, and Lily settled into a rhythm of normalcy. Morning walks, quiet dinners, and school events replaced the chaos of interrogation, media scrutiny, and viral videos. Yet beneath the calm remained disciplined, always alert to potential threats and maintaining routines that ensured both safety and preparedness. Lily grew more confident, resilient, and joyful, inspired by the calm strength of her father. Their bond, once tested by public scrutiny and federal suspicion, emerged stronger, unshakable, and filled with trust. On the anniversary of the viral incident, visited a quiet riverside spot, a place of personal significance, where he had first noticed danger and acted with instinct and courage. He traced his fingers lightly over the tattoo on his forearm, a silent tribute to fallen comrades, to survival, and to the missions that shaped his life. In the reflection of the water, he saw not just a man exonerated, but a father, a survivor, and a protector. Recognition by Admiral, public validation, and Lily's safety were victories, yes, but the essence of his life, the sacrifices, the discipline, and the quiet heroism, remained intact. Story became a quiet legend in his town, a tale of bravery, patience, and the delicate balance between secrecy and recognition. While the public saw only glimpses, Those who truly knew him understood the depths of his service, the risks he had endured, and the love that guided every decision. He had been a soldier, a father, and a survivor. Now he was a symbol of courage in both extraordinary and ordinary moments. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Lily walked home together. The world could speculate, debate, and admire, but their reality was simple: safety, love, and quiet resilience. Knew that life would always carry challenges, threats, and moments demanding discipline. But he also knew that with patience, vigilance, and unwavering dedication, he could navigate any obstacle, just as he had done before, just as he would continue to do for Lily, for those he protected, and for the silent legacy of Ghost Team 7. In the end, Cole's life was a story of hidden heroism, vindication, and unwavering commitment. From viral accusations to federal scrutiny, from the shadows of covert operations to partial recognition by a Navy admiral, he had endured, survived, and ultimately reclaimed both his honor and his family. And while the full truth remained secret, the essence of his courage, skill, and discipline would endure, quietly inspiring those who witnessed the story in public and private forever.